What if the most dangerous thing you could ever do in a world built on conformity, distraction, and manufactured opinion is simply think for yourself? Not dangerous to others, dangerous to the systems that need you confused, dangerous to the people who profit from your self-doubt, dangerous to the version of you that settled, obeyed, and shrunk to fit what the world expected. For most of your life, you've been handed beliefs, handed opinions, handed identities. School told you what to think. Society told you what to want. Social media told you who to be. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, you lost the one thing that separates ordinary men from the ones history remembers: your own mind. Today you'll discover 10 powerful Stoic shifts that happen the moment you start thinking for yourself, not small changes. Seismic ones. The way you see people changes. The way you make decisions changes. The way fear operates in your mind changes. Your relationship with failure, silence, criticism, and purpose, all of it, transforms. Marcus Aurelius did it while ruling an empire. Seneca did it while facing execution. Epictetus did it in chains. And you can do it right now, in the middle of your ordinary life. Watch till the end. The shift you skip might be the one keeping you ordinary when you were built to be exceptional. In 161 AD, a man inherited the most powerful throne on earth. He commanded armies. He controlled economies. He had access to every pleasure, every comfort, every distraction the ancient world could offer. And yet every night, Marcus Aurelius sat alone and wrote to himself. Not speeches for the public, not commands for his generals, private notes, corrections, reminders. He was engaged in the most radical act of his reign, thinking for himself. In Meditations, he wrote, "Confine yourself to the present. You can live only in the moment you are living." He wasn't writing about time management. He was writing about independence. The independence to meet this moment, not with borrowed opinions, not with inherited anxiety, not with the noise of 1,000 voices telling you who to be, but with the full force of your own disciplined mind. Seneca warned in Letters to Lucilius, Letter 7, "Retire into yourself as much as you can. Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving." This was Seneca's instruction to guard your mind like a fortress, because the world is always trying to colonize it. Your employer, your culture, your feed, they all have claims on your thinking, and most people surrender without a fight. Epictetus taught that the only true freedom is freedom of thought. A man can be enslaved, impoverished, and exiled and still be unconquerable if his mind remains his own. Here is the brutal truth of the modern world. Independent thinking is the rarest form of courage. Most people repeat what they've been told. Most people mistake absorbed opinions for personal conviction. Most people have never sat in silence long enough to hear what they actually believe. In this video, we'll explore 10 powerful shifts that happen when you break free from that pattern. When you stop outsourcing your thinking and start building a mind that no one can colonize. These are not motivational promises. These are documented transformations that occur psychologically, philosophically, and practically when you choose to think for yourself. Let's begin. Shift 1. You stop needing approval to feel certain. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 6, Passage 2. When you wake up in the morning, think about what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. This principle cuts deeper than gratitude. It is a declaration that your experience of life, your interpretation, your response, your certainty belongs to you and no one else. The moment you begin thinking for yourself, the first shift is this: you stop needing other people to confirm your reality. Most human beings walk through life in a constant state of checking. Did they approve? Did they agree? Did they nod? If the answer is yes, they feel certain. If the answer is no, they spiral. Their confidence is rented, borrowed from the reactions of others, and revoked the moment the approval disappears. Modern psychology calls this external validation dependency. Neuroscience shows it activates the same brain pathways as physical pain when withdrawn. The problem is severe, and most people never name it. You have a good idea at work, but instead of acting on it, you wait for someone to tell you it's good. You feel something is wrong in a relationship, but you suppress it until someone else confirms your intuition. You know what direction you need to go, but you delay indefinitely because no one has given you permission. That waiting, that constant suspension of your own judgment, is a form of self-betrayal, and it compounds over years into a life that feels vaguely not yours. Step 1. Practice what Marcus Aurelius called morning intention. Before you check anything external, no phone, no news, no opinion, spend 5 minutes writing one clear conviction you hold. Not what you believe others want you to believe, what you actually believe. Step 2. Act on one decision today without seeking a single external confirmation. Choose your lunch, your response, your direction, and own it completely. Step 3. Notice the discomfort. That discomfort is your mind detoxing from approval. It fades. What replaces it is something better, certainty that comes from inside. The 95% outsource their certainty to the crowd. That crowd is unreliable, inconsistent, and primarily focused on itself. When you develop internal certainty, you become someone the crowd looks to for direction. Not because you performed confidence, but because you built it from the inside out. This is the first mark of a dangerous mind, but this shift opens a door to something even more powerful. Let's move to shift 2. Shift 2, silence becomes your greatest weapon. Seneca wrote in letters to Lucilius, retire into yourself as often as you can. Meet with those who are going to make you better. Admit those whom you yourself can improve. He understood something that most men never discover. Silence is not the absence of thought. It is the laboratory where real thinking happens. When you begin thinking for yourself, your relationship with silence changes completely. Before, silence felt like a threat, a gap to be filled, an awkward moment to be escaped with noise, stimulation, or the reassurance of another voice. After, silence becomes where you live most powerfully, because silence is the only environment in which you can hear your own reasoning without contamination. Most people's thoughts are not their own. They're composed of recycled media, absorbed opinion, and borrowed anxiety. Silence strips that away and shows you what's actually underneath. Most people fear silence because they don't like what they find there. Unresolved questions, unfaced truths, uncomfortable clarity about choices they've been avoiding. The noise of modern life is not accidental. It functions as a buffer between you and your own mind. Social media, constant entertainment, background music, relentless busyness, all of it prevents the confrontation with yourself that independent thinking requires. Every morning before the world demands anything from you, sit in silence for 10 minutes. No phone, no music, no agenda, just sit. For the first 3 minutes, your mind will be loud replaying yesterday, planning tomorrow, checking invisible notifications. Let it run. By minute 5, something shifts. A real thought surfaces, an honest evaluation, an insight you couldn't access through noise. Write it down immediately. Over time, this practice doesn't just improve your thinking, it reveals your thinking. You begin to distinguish between what you believe and what you absorbed. The 95% fill every silence with noise, because noise is safe and silence is demanding. But you are building a mind that is comfortable with its own company. And a man who is comfortable in his own silence cannot be rattled by the world's chaos. That's not peace through passivity. That's strength through presence. But silence alone won't protect you from one of the most dangerous forces working against independent thought. Let's move to shift 3. Shift 3. You recognize manipulation instantly. Epictetus taught in the Enchiridion, be mostly silent, or speak merely what is needful, and in a few words. He wasn't prescribing antisocial behavior. He was training discrimination, the ability to know whose voice deserves your attention and whose deserves only silence. When you think for yourself, your perception changes at a fundamental level. You begin to see what you couldn't see before, the architecture of influence. Advertising is built to bypass your reason and trigger your emotion. Political messaging is designed to divide your loyalty and cloud your judgment. Social pressure is engineered to make you feel that conformity is safety. Before you developed independent thought, these forces worked on you without your awareness. Now you see them operating in real time, not with paranoia, with clarity. The problem is that manipulation hides as care. A friend who constantly undermines your decisions while claiming to look out for you. A boss who creates dependency while calling it mentorship. A culture that tells you happiness looks exactly like their product, their politics, their worldview. When your thinking is borrowed, these voices blend into the background as wisdom. When your thinking is your own, they announce themselves immediately. Step 1. When you feel sudden urgency to buy, decide, agree, or act, pause. Ask, where is this urgency coming from? Is it mine, or was it planted? Step 2. Trace every strong opinion you hold to its source. Did you reason your way to it, or did you absorb it without examination? Step 3. Practice what Stoics called the discipline of assent. Before accepting any impression as true, interrogate it. Ask, is this certain? Is this reasonable? Does this serve my growth or someone else's agenda? The 95% are moved by whoever speaks loudest. But you are building a mind that cannot be colonized. When you recognize manipulation, it loses its power, not because you become cynical, but because you become clear. Clarity is armor, and once you have it, no one can use your emotions as a weapon against you. Clarity, however, reveals something uncomfortable about the people around you. Shift 4 addresses exactly that. Shift 4. Your social circle changes permanently. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 6, Passage 30. What injures the hive injures the bee. He wasn't writing about passive community. He was writing about active discernment, choosing who you allow into your inner world, because those people shape the quality of your thinking. When you begin thinking for yourself, relationships face an immediate test. Some people in your life were connected to you not by genuine alignment, but by mutual convenience and conformity. You agreed with them. You didn't challenge them. You reflected back the same borrowed worldview. When you start thinking independently, that convenience disappears, and some people will experience your growth as a threat. Not because you changed for the worse, but because your clarity illuminates their confusion. This is one of the most difficult shifts, because it means accepting that growth is sometimes lonely, that the people who knew you before may not recognize you now. That integrity requires you to spend time with fewer people and give more genuine investment to the right ones. Seneca warned his friend Lucilius against spending too much time with people who drain rather than elevate, not as cruelty, as self-preservation. Step 1. Audit your inner circle honestly. List the 5 people you spend the most time with. For each one, ask, do I think more clearly or less clearly after spending time with them? Do I feel more capable or more doubtful? Step 2. Begin investing disproportionately in relationships that expand your thinking. This doesn't mean immediately cutting people off. It means diluting what dilutes you and deepening what deepens you. Step 3. Become the kind of thinker that attracts other thinkers. Show up with opinions you've actually formed. Ask questions that go beneath the surface. The 95% keep every relationship equally because they fear the discomfort of discrimination. The 5% understand that who you allow closest to your mind is the most consequential decision you make. When your circle elevates you, your thinking elevates, and elevated thinking produces an elevated life. But thinking for yourself demands something most people have never truly tested. Let's move to Shift 5. Shift 5. Fear of judgment loses its grip, Seneca wrote in On Tranquility of Mind. Chapter 14. It is the sign of a great mind to dislike greatness and to prefer things in measure to things in excess. This was not false modesty. This was freedom, the freedom of a man who no longer needed the world's applause to know his own worth. The fear of judgment is the primary prison of the unthinking mind. Before you develop independent thought, judgment from others functions as a governing force. It decides what you wear, what you say, what you admit, what you pursue. It keeps you performing a version of yourself that was designed for external consumption rather than internal truth. When you begin thinking for yourself, something extraordinary happens. You realize that most judgment is not actually about you. It's about the person judging their insecurities, their unexamined standards, their own conformity being threatened by your freedom. The problem with living under this fear is not just discomfort. It's compression. You compress your voice to avoid criticism. You compress your ambitions to avoid envy. You compress your truth to avoid disagreement. And slowly, across years, the compressed version of you becomes your default identity. You forget that a larger, truer version ever existed. Step 1. Choose one thing this week that you've been suppressing out of fear of judgment. An opinion, a creative pursuit, a conversation. Express it once, fully and without apology. Notice what happens. The world doesn't end. The discomfort is real but temporary. And on the other side of that discomfort is a small but powerful experience of freedom. Step 2. Practice what Marcus Aurelius did when facing criticism from his court. He returned to his private notebook and asked not, "What do they think?" but "What is true?" Step 3. Build a personal standard so clear and so solid that external judgment simply has no authority over it. The 95% live in a constant referendum, asking the world to vote on their worth. The 5% have already voted, and their vote is final. When you stop fearing judgment, you don't become arrogant. You become free. And free men build things that outlast the opinions of the small. And when judgment loses its grip, something else disappears with it. Let's move to Shift 6. Shift 6. Failure becomes information, not identity. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 5, Passage 8, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." These words weren't written by a man who never failed. They were written by a man who failed in full view of an empire and chose to call it data. Before independent thought, failure is catastrophic because your identity is borrowed. When your sense of self depends on what others think, failure is a public verdict. It tells you that your borrowed identity has been rejected, that the performance wasn't convincing. The shame isn't proportionate to the setback, it's proportionate to the degree of external dependency. When your identity is truly your own, failure cannot destroy what you've built internally. It becomes a revision, not a rejection. This shift doesn't make you indifferent to failure, it makes you efficient with it. The thinker who processes failure as information extracts every useful lesson and discards the emotional wreckage. The person who processes failure as identity drowns in the wreckage and never reaches the lesson. One approach produces growth. The other produces stagnation disguised as sensitivity. Step 1. The next time something goes wrong, give yourself exactly 1 hour of full emotional acknowledgement. Feel it completely. Then set a timer. When it goes off, open a notebook and write what actually happened. Not what it means about you, what objectively happened. Step 2. Write 3 things you would do differently. Not as self-punishment as curriculum, you are your own teacher now. Step 3. Execute one of those changes immediately, the same day. Don't wait for motivation. Move. Action after failure is the fastest way to rebuild confidence that is genuinely yours. The 95% let failure define their ceiling. The 5% let failure define their curriculum. When you think for yourself, you are never a victim of your setbacks. You are their student, and a man who learns from every fall becomes impossible to keep down. But the shift coming next is the one that most people in your life will never understand. Let's move to Shift 7. Shift 7. You develop convictions that don't bend. Epictetus wrote in the Discourses, Book 2, Chapter 1, men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things. This is the foundation of unshakable conviction. When your beliefs are built on reasoned thought rather than absorbed opinion, external events cannot overturn them, the way weather overturns a tent. Most people mistake strong emotion for conviction. They feel strongly about something today and call it a belief. Tomorrow someone challenges it with a persuasive argument and the feeling changes. The belief changes with it. That is not conviction. That is emotional weather. Real conviction is formed through deliberate reasoning. You examine a question from multiple angles. You consider the strongest counter-arguments. You test your position against reality. And then you hold it not rigidly but firmly, because it was earned through honest thought. The problem with having no convictions is that you become infinitely manipulable. Every strong voice can redirect you. Every trend can reshape your values. You end up living not one coherent life, but a series of borrowed lifestyles stitched together by whatever was most convincing last month. And deep down, you feel that incoherence as a persistent anxiety you can't name. Step 1. Choose 3 areas of your life where you genuinely don't know what you believe. Relationships, money, purpose, whatever applies. Spend 1 week researching each from primary sources. Not commentary, not social media. Primary sources, books, original philosophy, historical records. Step 2. Write a personal position on each one. Use your own language, no jargon. Step 3. Hold that position in conversation for 30 days. When challenged, don't immediately retreat. Engage the challenge. Test your reasoning. You'll either strengthen your conviction or legitimately revise it. Both outcomes are better than borrowed certainty, the 95% blow in whatever direction public opinion turns. The 5% have roots that hold when the wind comes. When you develop real convictions, you become someone that people trust, not because you're always right, but because you're always honest about your reasoning. And that consistency is rare enough to be powerful. But conviction without a clear purpose can become rigidity. Shift 8 shows you how those two forces work together. Shift 8. Your purpose becomes undeniable. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 10, Passage 16. Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, and do so with all your heart. This is not passive resignation. It is the active embrace of a man who knows exactly what he's here to do and does it without requiring the world's understanding. Before independent thought, purpose is borrowed too. You pursue what society calls meaningful. You chase what your family called successful. You perform the version of contribution that earns applause. And you wonder, in quiet moments, why nothing feels like enough. The reason is simple. You're running someone else's race. The track was laid for someone else. The finish line is at a distance that means nothing to you. When you think for yourself, you stop running that race. You lay your own track, and suddenly effort doesn't feel like sacrifice. It feels like expression. This shift is uncomfortable at first, because clarity about your real purpose often means confronting how much time has been spent on the wrong things. Not wasted, invested in lessons, but redirected now, urgently. Step 1. Ask yourself, if no one were watching, if no one would ever approve or validate, what would you spend your time building? Not immediately. Sit with the question for 3 days. Let it surface honestly. Step 2. Identify the smallest possible first action toward that thing. Not a plan, an action. One concrete step you can take this week. Step 3. Take it and note how it feels different from the obligatory actions in your current life. That feeling is your compass. It doesn't lie. The 95% spend their lives building someone else's vision of a good life. The 5% endure the discomfort of building their own. It's harder, it's lonelier, and it produces a satisfaction so deep that nothing external can replicate or revoke it. When your purpose is undeniably yours, your energy becomes inexhaustible because you're no longer spending it, you're generating it. But purpose without one more critical shift can still be derailed by the most invisible enemy. Let's move to Shift 9. Shift 9, solitude becomes a source of power, Seneca wrote in Letters to Lucilius, Letter 10. The first thing which philosophy undertakes to give is fellow feeling with all men. In other words, sympathy and sociability. We part company with our promise if we are unlike other men. We must see to it that the means by which we seek to attract admirers do not make us objects of ridicule. But more directly, in Letter 25, he wrote about the necessity of periodic withdrawal, not from life, but from the noise that prevents you from thinking clearly. The Stoics understood that the deepest form of human power is cultivated in private. Before independent thought, solitude is uncomfortable because the unexamined mind is poor company. When your identity depends on external input, being alone means being deprived. Without feedback, validation, stimulation, you feel hollow. This is not weakness of character. It is the entirely predictable result of a mind that has never been introduced to itself. When you begin thinking for yourself, solitude transforms. The silence that once felt like deprivation begins to feel like supply. Time alone becomes time with the most important mind in your world, your own. The problem most people have with solitude is they confuse it with loneliness. Loneliness is the pain of unwanted isolation. Solitude is the power of chosen withdrawal. One is suffered, the other is practiced. Epictetus could sit in a prison and be free because he had mastered the interior landscape. Most people sit in a crowd and feel imprisoned because they've never explored it. Step 1, schedule 3 hours of deliberate solitude each week. Not reading, not podcasts, just you, a notebook, and your own thoughts. Step 2, use this time to examine one important area of your life without input from others. What do you think about your career, your relationships, your trajectory? Write it without framing it for an audience. Write it like no one will ever read it, because that's when it becomes true. Step 3, protect this time aggressively. The world will fill every gap you allow. Let it fill somewhere else. The 95% are uncomfortable alone because they've never met themselves. The 5% actively seek their own company because that's where their best thinking lies. When solitude becomes a source of power, you stop needing the world to energize you. You generate your own momentum. And that self-sufficiency is what makes you genuinely dangerous. One final shift remains, and it is the one that ties everything together. Let's move to Shift 10. Shift 10. You become impossible to control, Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 12, Passage 23. Everything harmonizes with me, which is harmonious to thee, O universe. Nothing for me is too early nor too late, which is in due time for thee. Everything is fruit to me which thy seasons bring, O nature. All things come of thee, have their being in thee, and return to thee. This is the final declaration of a man who has become truly ungovernable by external force, not because he rejected the world, because he had so thoroughly developed his own inner order that the world's disorder had no purchase on him. When you think for yourself, genuinely, consistently, courageously, you become impossible to control. Not through rebellion, through sovereignty. The advertiser cannot panic you into buying. The politician cannot frighten you into compliance. The crowd cannot shame you into conformity. The algorithm cannot trap you in an outrage loop, because you built something inside that all of these forces require you to lack: a governing mind. This is the shift that makes the previous 9 permanent. Without it, independent thinking is a mood, something you access on good days and lose when pressure hits. With it, independent thinking becomes identity. You don't just think for yourself sometimes. You cannot think any other way. The problem in the modern world is that systems of control are designed by some of the most intelligent people alive. They understand psychology, reward loops, social pressure, and fear responses with scientific precision. They are not villains, they are architects, and they've built an environment optimized to keep your mind rented rather than owned. Step 1. Identify one area of your life where you are currently being governed by external force, not guided, governed, where you feel you have no real choice. Name it specifically. Step 2. Apply the dichotomy of control from Lesson 1. What part of this situation is genuinely within your power? Start there. Step 3. Make one sovereign choice in that area today, not a dramatic gesture. A quiet, clear decision made entirely by you for reasons that are entirely yours. That is the beginning of true freedom. The 95% will live and die governed by opinion, by fear, by habit, by the expectations of people they never chose. The 5% will do something rarer and harder. They will think, really think, for themselves, with discipline, with courage, without permission. When you reach this shift, you don't announce it, you don't perform it, you don't need to. The people around you will sense it in the way you carry your decisions. In the stillness behind your eyes when others are panicking, in the quiet certainty that no provocation can reach. That is what it means to be dangerous, not to others, to every force that ever tried to own your mind. Let's return to where we began. You came here because something in you knows you've been thinking borrowed thoughts, living a borrowed life, carrying opinions you inherited rather than earned. And part of you, maybe a part that's been quiet for a long time, has been waiting for permission to change that. Here is the only permission you will ever need. Your mind belongs to you. It always has. You just have to claim it. Let's recap the 10 shifts. Shift 1. When you think for yourself, you stop needing approval to feel certain. Your confidence becomes internal, permanent, and unrevocable. Shift 2. Silence becomes your greatest weapon, the laboratory where real thinking happens and borrowed noise dissolves. Shift 3. You recognize manipulation instantly, because clarity is armor, and once you have it, your emotions cannot be used against you. Shift 4. Your social circle changes permanently. You stop tolerating what dilutes your thinking and invest in what elevates it. Shift 5. Fear of judgment loses its grip, not because you stop caring, but because your standard becomes your own. Shift 6. Failure becomes information, not identity. You extract every lesson and discard the wreckage. Shift 7. You develop convictions that don't bend, because they were built through reason, not absorbed through emotion. Shift 8. Your purpose becomes undeniable, because it's finally yours, not inherited, not performed, not borrowed. Shift 9. Solitude becomes a source of power. Your own company becomes the richest environment your mind can occupy. Shift 10. You become impossible to control, not through rebellion, but through sovereignty. A governing mind that no external force can colonize. These aren't ideas, they are the documented transformations of men who chose the harder road, the road of honest, disciplined, independent thought. Marcus Aurelius walked it alone in the most public position on earth. Seneca walked it facing death. Epictetus walked it in chains. You have no chains. You have no empire demanding your attention. You have this moment, and this moment is enough to begin. Become the kind of thinker the world has never been able to manage. Become the kind of man whose mind is genuinely, completely, irreversibly his own. If this video gave you something real today, tap the like button. Not for me, as a signal to yourself that you're serious. Drop one word in the comments, the shift that hit you hardest. Just the number. Just the word. your public declaration that you're done thinking what you're told to think, and subscribe. This channel exists for one reason: to give you the tools to build a mind that cannot be broken, borrowed, or bought. Become the master of your mind. Rebuild what was taken. Refocus on what is real. Rise above the noise that was never yours to carry. You were built for this. Rise above.